This is The Devil's Guide to D&D, and this is part 2 of my look at the Heroes of Krynn, the new Unearthed Arcana for the Dragonlance setting. Today I'm looking at backgrounds and feats, and this is a weird one. Why? Well, firstly, we have feat trees. That is, feats that have a prerequisite of other feats. We've had them before, but not in 5th edition. The popular opinion has been that feat trees didn't work with 5e since individual feats are stronger than in the past, and you also get less of them. But they popped up, sort of, in Strixhaven, and here they are again, with greater force. Strixhaven also introduced suit-up backgrounds, way too powerful to be used alongside normal backgrounds. It's been thought that this was a one-time thing for a specific campaign setting, but we've got them here again, suggesting that this may be the wave of the future. And then there's alignments. Remember all those folks frothing about Wizards of the Coast removing alignments? Well, they should have saved their froth, because alignments are back. At least part of all this, I think, is still a backlash from Strixhaven. If you recall, or watched my video on what the hell happened to Strixhaven, the D&D community rejected the idea of having subclasses that could be applied to multiple classes. And the result was, well, this is why we can't have nice things.
This is why we can't have nice things!
Now with Dragonlance, they've got a setting where it makes sense to have the same subclasses go to multiple classes. In particular, the Orders of Knights, where a fighter or a paladin are equally fitting, and Society of Mages, where wizards, warlocks, and bards should all fit in, that they should all be taking the same subclass. But since the community went nuts on the idea before, instead WotC's tried to fit flimsy versions of these subclasses in via a combination of souped-up backgrounds and feats. The results are mixed. Okay, more poor than mixed, but there are bright spots. And particularly, while before there were feats and backgrounds in the Strixhaven book that could only be used in that setting, now you can mix them with the Dragonlance setting, assuming these make it to the final book. Of course, that means Dragonlance backgrounds and feats don't work outside of Dragonlance or Strixhaven, though as I implied, perhaps it's setting up how things will work in the future. So let me start with the backgrounds. There's two. Firstly, we have our martial background, Knight of Solamnia. And I'm not going to pronounce these right. Feel free to correct me in the comments below. And reading this doesn't read like a background. This reads like a job. This isn't what you were, this is what you are. So again, sounds like it ought to be a subclass. But okay, you get athletics and survival, fine. You get a musical instrument, you get a language. Then you get some uninteresting equipment, but then you gain the Squire of Solamnia feat. And that's the biggie. So we have a background giving you a free feat. How good is that? Well, we'll take a look at the feat in a moment. The rest of this isn't terribly interesting. There's some very generic personality traits and a trinket table, which is only interesting if you want to try and figure out what the flat silver disc that you can record your heroics upon might be. Now, one thing to note that in the description of building a knight, it says a good fit is a class or subclass with martial prowess, particularly fighters and paladins, perhaps some clerics and maybe valor or sword bards, or a zealot barbarian. Yeah, remember that for later. This'll come up again. Our other background is the arcane one, Mage of High Sorcery. So no clerical background, no roguish background, just these two. If your backgrounds are giving feats, you need backgrounds for everyone. Okay, what is this? It gives you Arcana and History, fine. 2 languages, fine. Some uninteresting equipment, and then the feat Initiate of High Sorcery. Again, we'll be looking at that in a moment. In the section for building a character who takes this background, they suggest bards, wizards, or warlocks. They're less keen on religious casters, or innate ones, which means sorcerers. They do go on to say that some of these less desirables, and even a marshal who trained in magic, might get in, which really is kind of weird. The main thing to notice here is taking this feat means that you're an initiate of high sorcery, meaning you're getting a job, not really a background. Clearly these 2 backgrounds are better than any of the normal backgrounds simply because they give you a feat. Otherwise, they're fine. Both of them also have an add-on that you can get free meals from others who are already in the orders, which is fine, but the feat is the thing. Alright, so let's look at our feats. We've got 10 of them. They're split into 3 feat trees, though really I'd call them more feat bushes because there's never more than 2 levels. We have 3 basic feats, 1 martial, 1 arcane, and 1 divine. No matching background for that divine one. Then 3 advanced martial feats that require the basic one, 3 advanced arcane ones that require the basic arcane feat, and 1 advanced divine feat that requires the basic divine one. The advanced feats also require you to be at 4th level. I guess in case your variant human was gonna snap them up? Well, let's take a look at the martial ones first, starting with the one that doesn't have a prerequisite, which is Squire of Solamnia, the free feat we got from our background. Except it does have a prerequisite. It has a prerequisite of Squire Squireship of the Knights of Solamnia, which would be interesting if they ever defined Squireship of the Knights of Solamnia anywhere, which they do not. It's not mentioned again. Somewhere along the way it probably was, but without that, I'll take this as a description, and as a description, it means you're a squire, which again is a job. Well, what do you get? You get martial training, which includes medium armor and martial weapons. Whoa. Then you also get defensive rider, advantage on saves to avoid falling off your mount, and encouraging rally, which allows you to give advantage as a reaction on a save once per long rest. And this whole feat has deep design problems. Let's just take encouraging rally and say it's fine but not much, and toss it away. It's fine. But the others? Defensive rider. Well, there's a piece of adventuring gear, the military saddle. It costs 20 gold pieces, that gives you advantage to remain mounted. You're not going to have knights riding without saddles. So defensive rider isn't much of anything. It all comes down to martial training, which is medium armor and martial weapons, which is great. And also rather interesting that we've finally got a way of picking up medium armor without having light armor. But of course the problem here is this feat, and the background that gives it to you, is meant for martial combatants, particularly fighters and paladins. And they've already got medium armor and martial weapons. Hell, if you add in warrior clerics, valor bards, or zealot barbarians, you find they've all got medium armor. Not only that, but most of them already have shields, which means they're doing better than this. That makes this a terrible feat for a martial, for a fighter or paladin. Okay, it's free, so it's not terrible because you get encouraging rally once. But it's not any good. But you know who it is good for? Non-martials. In particular, this would be nice for a wizard. They usually can't carry shields anyway, because they're balancing spell components and focuses and hand gestures. So some medium armor's great. Martial weapon doesn't hurt to upgrade that crossbow. Sorcerer would be very happy with that medium armor too. And any bard except the martial ones would love some medium armor. So this is a really nice feat for exactly who it isn't for. And who it is for? Really, why would you design this? If this is what you're trying to make, a squire feat, then you should give perhaps a plus to the armor class if you're already wearing heavy armor, or some kind of plus for those already using martial weapons. Martials just don't need this. Well, at least anyone who's gonna scream about feats being too powerful when put into backgrounds can calm down, because this one is certainly not too powerful, at least for the people it's meant for. Alright, with this feat, you can take one of three others: the Knight of the Crown, Rose, or Sword. Kind of generic names. Taking these feats indicate that you've joined an order of knights, so really a job or subclass. Some added text says you can join a different order. Would it be worth it to join one and then join another? That is, to take multiple of these feats? No. Really, no. Let's see. Now, two of these are half feats, and then they give one additional feature, while the third gives two features. I'll start with Knight of the Crown, and it's for order and obedience. It's a half feat for strength and dex. The feature, Tactical Teamwork, lets you grant advantage to an attack made by one of your allies, with some limitations. Your ally needs to be within 30 feet, and the target needs to be next to you. You also use your reaction, which means no opportunity attacks for you, and you can use this proficiency times per day. It's not bad. Of course, you could take the Ritual Caster feat instead, get Find Familiar, and have your owl grant your ally advantage every turn using the help action. And that feat gives you a ton of other things. Now, what is it about combining strength and dex half feats that gives you suboptimal feats? We're talking piercer, slasher, and athlete, so Knight of the Crown fits right in. Of course, anyone shopping for a strength half feat could go with the far superior Crusher, and for either strength or dex, I'd say Skilled Expert is a much better buy. What it comes down to is Knight of the Crown is never going to be worth your ASI. It's not that it's bad, it doesn't do enough, and you've got better choices. Our second feat, or if you wish, our second order of knight to join, or our second job, is the Knight of the Rose, and it's about justice. It's the other half feat, granting a +1 to con or charisma. So really for paladins. The feature is Bolstering Rally. You give temp hit points to 3 allies. The number equals your ability score plus proficiency mod plus a roll of your hit die, and you can do this proficiency times per day. I like them using hit dice for things. It's a mechanic we haven't been seeing, so that's cool. That said, I find it weird here. How healthy you are affects how much you can bolster allies? So for For early levels, this will be around 12 temp hit points 2 or 3 times a day. This beats out the Inspiring Leader feat, which has never been one of my favorites, but people do like it. I definitely suggest this instead to anyone looking at that. Now, available half feats for Charisma include Fey Touched, Shadow Touched, and Telekinetic, and this is nowhere near their level. For Con, half feats include Resilient, Crusher, and Tavern Brawler, so Knight of the Rose isn't quite so completely outclassed, particularly if you've already got proficiency in con saves. So if it's con you're wanting to raise, yeah, this is at least worth a look. Our third branch feat is Knight of the Sword, and it's about bravery. Bravery, justice, loyalty. I'm thinking these knightly orders don't have enough to make them distinct. Well, this is the odd man out, granting proficiency instead of a half feat. Its first feature grants proficiency in one of Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma saves. The second part lets you expend a hit die, those hit dice again, roll it, and then add the results to a failed Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma saving throw that you or an ally failed, perhaps making it succeed. You can attempt this repeatedly until you succeed, then you can't try it again until you have a long rest. That's not bad, and definitely better for a fighter or paladin with their D10 hit die, so it's nice that its intended audience is getting the bigger boosts, although it's better still for a barbarian with their D12 hit die. Okay, with the first half giving you a save proficiency, the obvious comparison is with Resilient, which is a half feat that grants proficiency in your choice of any save. I'd say Resilient is better, but this is solid, and you can take both. Now, it's going to be a very odd campaign where getting proficiency in Intelligence or Charisma saves are worth an ASI, but Wisdom's another matter. However, Paladins get both Wisdom and Charisma saves, so I guess this feat isn't so well crafted for the classes it's supposed to be for after all. Now, this feat is most tempting for a bard who wants to get Wisdom saves here and then can get con saves through Resilient. Of course, he's not going to do quite so well with the second part of the feat since his hit die is smaller, but he'd do okay. So that's our martial feat tree. Our arcane one starts with Initiate of High Sorcery. Remember, this is the one we got free when we took our magical background, and this one also mentions a prerequisite, that of being an apprentice of high sorcery, which again is not a defined thing. With this feat, you choose your favorite moon, and based on that moon, you get a cantrip and can choose one first level spell from one of 2 schools of magic. Importantly, the choices are limited to wizard spells from those schools. I've already heard people missing that and grabbing a cleric only spell. So this is a scaled back magic initiate feat, with 1 less cantrip and with much greater restrictions on what spells you can have. The pluses, we can cast the spell again if we've got spell slots, which may or may not matter depending on your class and the spell, and you can choose the spell's casting ability from Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma, which seems good, but probably won't matter due to which spells are worth having. Our options? Well, if you go with the Moon Nutari, again, forgive my pronunciation, your choices for your cantrip are Chill Touch, Mage Hand, and Vicious Mockery. Now, I take Mage Hand with every caster I get, but would I take a feat to get it? Not normally. And Vicious Mockery is great at low levels, but these are probably not the cantrips I'd be going for. As for the first level spell, we can choose it from Evocation or Necromancy. From Evocation, we get some direct damage spells which casters trade out when they level. Really, it's a terrible idea to use a feat like this to get a direct damage spell. At first level, second level, this would be good, but after that, this is quickly just going to be outdated. As for Necromancy spells to choose, there is nothing. There is absolutely nothing worthwhile. Our second moon choice is Lunatari, and here we go. Guidance, Message, and Prestidigitation. The real problem here is I want more than one of them. Guidance, of course, is the one to take, but boy, Prestidigitation, I'd say that's the most cast spell in my present campaign. And your first level spell can come from Divination or Transmutation. And yeah, this is a little bit of a step up. Divination, you can get things like Comprehend Languages, Detect Magic. Gift of Alacrity is pretty much the best of the divination spells, if it's allowed in your game. Transmutation will give you some movement spells, Expeditious Retreat, Jump, though probably the one to grab would be Featherfall. Our third moon choice is Solinari, which gives you Produce Flame, Resistance, or Spare the Dying. Okay, that's the very weakest cantrip grouping. I guess the high point would be Produce Flame, but our first level spell comes from Abjuration or Conjuration. And yeah, these are the ones you want. Abjuration gives you Absorb Elements, Mage Armor, or Shield. Yeah, most of the time it's going to be Shield, but any of those are good. And Conjuration, that's fine familiar. So the cantrip you want is from Lunatari, and the spell you want is from Solinari. Nuatari is just bad, I'll ignore it. For Lunatari, if I need to cast Featherfall more than once a day, something's very odd, so getting to cast it with a spell slot is not a big boon. Of course, it's more of one with Gift of Alacrity, but if I'm looking at Lunatari, it's for guidance, and I'd be better off taking Magic Initiate Cleric and getting Bless and another cantrip. Similarly, if I wanted Find Familiar, which is always the crown jewel, Magic Initiate Wizard or Ritual Casting Wizard are far better buys. The only time I see this feat beating out Magic Initiate is for paladins who want to repeatedly cast Shield. That is, if paladins are allowed to take this feat. Wizards and sorcerers already have Shield. So for a competitive feat, this just doesn't make it. Magic Initiate is better and similar, but as a free feat we get with our background, that's different. And then this is sweet. Amusingly, it's weakest for wizards who have access to all the first level spells. Their best move is just to grab guidance and be done with it. But for casters with limited known spells, this is great. A bard or a sorcerer starting off with Find Familiar? Yeah, I want that. Hell, I'd be happy with Produce Flame then. It makes light. So yeah, as a standalone feat, not great. As part of a background? Wow, this is a game changer. At least for some classes. The 3 follow-up feats, that is, those that require you to have Initiative High Sorcery, are the Adepts of Black, Red, and White Robes. Or, if you prefer, the Evil, Neutral, and Good Mages. It's nice in the world when they color-code themselves. Once again, these feats sound less like feats and more like jobs or subclasses. You really should only be taking one of them as they indicate that you've joined a specific order. Each of them grants a 2nd level spell from 2 specified schools of magic, with my favorites, Enchantment and Illusion, missing. And this spell you can cast without a spell slot once per long rest, and can also cast it with spell slots. And the choice of these spells is not limited to just wizard spells. And then each one of these feats grants another feature. Starting with Adept of the Black Robes, that's the bad guy casters. They get a 2nd level spell from Evocation or Necromancy. Going through the 2nd level spells for Evocation and Necromancy, the standout by far is Spiritual Weapon. There really isn't anything else that I would even think about. The feature that goes with it is Life Channel. You can choose one creature who failed a save against a spell you cast, expend a number of hit dice equal to the spell's level, roll half that number, and do that much extra damage to one creature. Boy, that's kinda twisty. So you're 5th level and cast a fireball over 6 enemies. 5 of them fail their saves, taking, we'll say, 28 damage each. The 6th takes 14, for a total of 154 damage. Not bad. You can choose one of the 5, and then expend 3 of your total 5 hit dice, then halve that, round it up, making it 2 dice you roll, ending up with 6 points of extra damage. That's a whopping 4% more. You now have 2 hit dice left, so you can only do that again to a weaker spell or use them for healing. Now your hit dice is your normal way to heal in 5e, and casters are fragile. But I suppose if you are in a party with excessive healing, perhaps it won't harm you. And I do like the hit dice mechanic, though would prefer it connected to some kind of blood magic. The summation here is the damage is too little to be worth your ASI, so it's down to, is Spiritual Weapon worth it? I'd say let's go to a different magical order. Choice 2 is Adept of the Red Robes. These are the neutral dudes.
What are your thoughts on this momentous occasion? Your neutralness?
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Their choice of a 1st level spell comes from Divination or Transmutation. With Divination, I'd say the best choice is Fortune's Favor, if that's allowed in your game, and I rather like Borrowed Knowledge. Transmutation can get you Spike Growth. Your feature here is Magical Balance, which is quite good. When you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, and roll a 9 or lower, you can use your reaction to make it a 10, and you can use this proficiency times per day. For ability checks, at least for abilities you're proficient in, this is going to allow you to succeed most of the time. For attack rolls, well, this feat is meant mostly for casters, meaning a 10 probably won't hit for a weapon attack, but probably will for a spell attack. The big use of this is for saves, but it won't help much for untrained saves, particularly if your stat is low. That is, if you don't have a bonus, then a 10 won't do it. But for your main save, the one you're already trained in, be it Con, Wisdom, or Dex, this almost assures that you'll make all the ones you need to. So is this a keeper? Well, if I'm worried about saves, I'd rather take Resilient and get another of my saves trained than do this. As for the spells, bards and sorcerers can always use more. Warlocks can't cast enough that makes a huge difference, and for wizards, this hardly matters. And our final arcane feat is Adept of the White Robes. That's the good guys. They're in white. Your spell can come from the schools of Abjuration and Conjuration, and once again, that's probably your best choice. Abjuration has such options as Aid, Lesser Restoration, and Pass Without Trace. If your party doesn't have one of those are all good things to pick up. For Conjuration, the best choices are probably Misty Step and Voice Vortex Warp. Your feature is Protective Ward, which is a weakened pseudo-healing word. You can use it as your reaction to reduce damage to a creature. It's got to be within 30 feet instead of 60. You reduce D4 plus your spellcasting mod's damage for a first level spell slot. And like Healing Word, it scales horribly. At 4th level, using this with a first level slot, you'll prevent around 6 points of damage. But using a 2nd level slot, it only prevents 8 points of damage. So you're way better off just using first level slots. So is this any good? Maybe. Depending on your table. Also depending on how good your party healer is. Assuming your healer is poor, then it can be. But Healing Word is only good because it can get a downed ally back up. And when you use it, you know that's what it's going to do because your ally is laying on the ground. But with this, you'd only want to use it if you know that reducing that much damage would stop your ally from going down. But there's no general in-game way of knowing that. If your DM lets you tell each other exactly how many hits you can take and how many hits you have taken, then this can work out. But if your table is a bit more realistic and doesn't share specific numeric data like that, then this isn't a good use of your spell slots. As for the first level spell, well, this one's telling. The best option of all of them is Misty Step, and Fey Touched gives you Misty Step plus a first level spell plus a +1 to an attribute score. I'd always choose Fey Touched over this, but this isn't bad, and depending on how your table behaves and your party, this is probably the best of the 3 arcane feats here, and it is a way of giving your wizard a kind of healing. So none of these are great, but 2 of them are decent, and if joining a magical order fits the campaign, sure, go for it. The last feat tree is the divine one, and starts with Divinely Favored. This is much like the arcane feat, meaning it is a scaled back version of Magic Initiate. Again, with only 1 cantrip, your choice of spellcasting ability, and you can cast the first level spell with a spell slot. This time you get no choice at all for your cantrip. It's Thaumaturgy, which I enjoy using, but in practical terms, it's not up there with Prestidigitation. I'm happy to have it for fun, but it would not be the cantrip I'd choose from a feat. Then you get a first level spell. What you can choose is based on your alignment. Yeah, alignment. A lot of people didn't expect to see alignment coming back. I'm really curious where we'll see it again in the future. But whatever your alignment, you can take a first level wizard spell. Your alignment opens up another class's spell list for your choice. Evil gets you the warlock list, good gets cleric, and neutral gets druid. Meaning pretty much for everyone, Find Familiar is the top choice, with shield second. Warlock brings in hex, cleric brings in bless and healing word, and druid gets you goodberry. With no choice of cantrip, this becomes the worst of the Magic Initiate clones, falling behind the arcane ones here, the Strixhaven one, or ones if you count it as 5, and Artificer Initiate, which does beg the question, why does this exist? Which begs the bigger question, why isn't there a divine background that gives this? That's clearly what's missing. As a competitive feat, this sucks compared to other options, but as part of a background, it'd be quite good. Something's missing. Well, does its one branch justify its existence? That branching feat is Divine Communication, and it's a half feat, giving a +1 to whatever ability you claimed for divine favor. Okay, half feat helps. What else do we get? 2 things. Celestial Tongues gives you 3 languages, Celestial and 2 others. I'm sure this can be helpful, but you've already got a couple languages, and with the Comprehend Languages and Tongues spell, this is fine, but mostly it's flavor, so we need a big topper, and we get Divine Omens. You can cast 2nd level Augury and 5th level Commune spells without a spell slot, and you can't do it again for 1 to 4 days, though you can cast them with spell slots. Well, that's odd. Now, I've heard people rave about these 2 spells, so apparently they are good somewhere? I've never treated them as spells. They're plot instigators. The DM wants you to go in a certain way or learn something, here's a way you do that. If these spells don't exist in the party, the DM will find some other way to get the information to you. So I'd never take this feat, and I expect it isn't good for most games, but if you are in one where commune is helpful, and otherwise you can't get information you need, then sure, I suppose. This short divine tree is ungrown. I don't like either feat, and without a background to go with them, I don't know why they're here. To wrap it up, I like feat trees, though I do understand the problem with them for 5e. What they can do is give you a pseudo-subclass, a secondary subclass, thus expanding on a character's options without going through all the full multi-classing stuff. Thing is, they're using them exactly wrong here, at least in flavor. That is, a feat tree is best used to give a magical type character a martial ability, or to give a martial character some magic. While that clearly wasn't the intention, the funny part is that seems to be what they've actually done. With how they designed it, the martial feats work better on arcane classes than they do on martial classes, and the arcane feats work as well on martials as they do on arcane. As for the divine, well, they really needed a background. I really do think what we're getting here is still backwash from Strixhaven, and I wish the community had been more open to new ideas. Instead, we're getting weird feats and backgrounds. It's probably not the way I would go with backgrounds, but if they're going in this way, they really need to come out with some sort of ruling allowing you to add some regular feats onto some of the old backgrounds. Otherwise, these all aren't playing nice together. And that's it for now. Now let's see if no one else can release anything for a week or so, and I can get out the video I was planning for. Take care, take it easy with that cocaine, and I'll be back next time.